The galaxy was quiet. Not the kind of quiet born from harmony or understanding, but the stillness that comes when something far more powerful demands silence. For over 1,000 years, the Veltrax Dominion had ruled without war. Their minds could reach across solar systems, bending leaders, silencing rebellion before it had a chance to speak. Where resistance once flared, submission had become the only language spoken. Most beings no longer questioned it. Peace, they were taught, was survival. And survival was enough, but far out on the fringe of known space, on a cold and forgotten moon called Karsus 4, a secret buried deep below layers of steel and ice began to stir, inside an old Dominion facility long since considered. Automated and a Reliftan alert blinked red. One of the cryostasis chambers had failed, a system glitch, or perhaps time finally catching up. Either way, the failsafe triggered. Temperature rising, vitals stabilizing, memory resonancing. A human was waking up. The last entry on the chambers. Log read, subject, Commander Elias Rourke. Status, dangerous. Do not release. Elias Rourke had once been a soldier of Earth's final resistance. A commander known for his refusal to surrender, even as humanity fell under the grip of the Dominions. Influence. When the final strike failed, he had been captured, not killed, but preserved. The Veltrax found value in fear. And Elias, as one of the last defiant humans, had become a symbol of what resistance would cost. Now, his eyes snapped open. His first breath was fire. Muscles screamed in protest as years of stillness ended in seconds. The chamber hissed open, releasing steam into the stale air of the dormant facility. Elias stumbled out, bare feet hitting cold metal. The room was dark except for a few flickering status lights. His mind raced. The last thing he remembered was the battle over Titan's Gate. The sky burning, his team going silent one by one. How long had it been? He moved slowly, instinct guiding him. Years of training of survival hadn't left him. Not entirely. He found a wall console, managed to force it online. Most of the system was corrupted, but the date made his breath catch. 716 years. 7 centuries since he'd been locked away. 7 centuries of silence. He wandered through the facility, finding only dust and shadows. No guards, no alarms. Just the hum of machinery left running far longer than it was ever designed for. The galaxy had moved on, and it had left him behind. He finally found a room with a long-dead viewport. Cracks in the glass revealed a frozen world outside. Karsus, 4 still, as lifeless as the day he arrived. The stars beyond were unfamiliar, their constellations shifted by time. Elias stood in the dark and tried to understand. Had they won? Had peace finally come? The question didn't last long. He found a console that still worked barely on, pulled what data remained. What he saw chilled him more than the frozen wind outside. The Veltrax hadn't disappeared. They had succeeded there. Were no wars, no resistant cells, no independent systems. Peace, enforced not by diplomacy, but by psychic domination. Entire civilizations brought into line through subtle control and quiet threat. 1,000 years without bloodshed, but also without freedom and humanity. Scattered, absorbed, pacified. He read their names listed in the Dominion archives like data entries in a filing system. Not enemies, not allies, just managed. He sat back in the chair, staring at the screen as realization sank in. This wasn't peace. This was surrender, carved into history and sealed with silence. And Elias Rourke had never been good at staying quiet. Somewhere out there, the Veltrax still ruled. But they had forgotten something important. You can only bury defiance for so long before it wakes up. Elias Rourke didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay. The facility on Karsus's IV was too quiet, too forgotten. If the Veltrax had truly built an empire on silence, then he was a loud problem waiting to be noticed. He scavenged supplies what little remained after. Centuries of decayed located a hangar sealed beneath the ice. It took him 3 days and a half dozen broken tools to force it open. Inside was a ship old, boxy, and definitely not built for speed, but functional. A survey shuttle likely left behind when the Dominion stopped caring about this corner of space. Elias patched its systems together using what he remembered from his time in the Resistance. He had trained on a dozen different starcraft. This one was barely a challenge. When the engines flared to life, the cold air around the hangar trembled. Elias sat in the pilot's seat, hands on controls that hadn't been touched in centuries. The stars waited beyond the frozen sky. And for the first time in 700 years, someone who remembered freedom lifted off from Karsus 4. He didn't know what he would find out there, but he had to see it for himself. Elias traveled for weeks through what used to be the frontier, now just another part of the Dominion. He kept his ship quiet, staying off official lanes, watching broadcasts from the edge of signal range. At first, he thought the peace might be real. Planets gleamed with advanced infrastructure, stations hummed with order. Crime was almost non-existent, but there was something strange in every broadcast. People smiled, but their eyes seemed distant. Every conversation felt rehearsed. No debates, no disagreement. Every leader from every species spoke in the same measured tone, praising galactic harmony and the guidance of unity. To Elias, it didn't sound like peace. It sounded like control. Then came the final proof, on a refueling stop near the asteroid colonies of Fentari Reach. He met a human, a technician named Nilo, working on an orbital relay station. Elias approached him quietly, curious to see how far humanity had changed. Nilo greeted him warmly, offered help, even shared rations. But when Elias asked about the old days Earth history, the Resistance, the worn Nilo's face went blank. "I don't think about those things," he said with a polite smile. "They're not helpful," Elias pressed. "Do you remember who we used to be?" Nilo tilted his head. "We used to be afraid. The Veltrax helped us let go of that." Elias realized that Nilo wasn't pretending. He truly didn't remember what it meant to question authority. Somewhere in the past, humanity hadn't just surrendered physically. They had surrendered mentally, piece by piece, until only the shell remained. That night, Elias sat alone in his shuttle, staring at the stars. The galaxy had changed, but he hadn't. And maybe that was enough. He pulled up an old star chart from his ship's memory banks. A red-marked sector blinked near the edge of known space Sepsilon Trier, the last reported location of a hidden military base known as Bastion. Red, it had been a fallback plan during the war. But the signal was never sent. If there was anything left of humanity's fighting spirit, it might be buried there before setting course. Elias accessed a restricted archive salvaged from the relay. Stationed something Nilo had been too calm to question. Among the files was a dormant AI deactivated centuries ago. Its designation, CR-7. Elias reactivated it. A soft voice echoed in the cockpit. System awakening. Designation, CR-7. Please confirm, operator. He smirked. Commander Elias Rourke. Earth resistance. Reactivating the future. The AI paused. Status of resistance terminated. Not anymore, Elias said, hands tightening on the controls. The stars were no longer silent. Not to him. With CR-7 online and a new destination ahead, Elias accelerated. Into deep space, the Veltrax had built a galaxy on stillness. But stillness could crack. Peace born of fear could only last until someone remembered what it felt like to resist, and that someone was awake. Elias Rourke stared out the viewport as the stars slid past, unfamiliar and yet strangely comforting. In the old days, space had meant danger pirates, blockades, war zones. No, it was too quiet. Every system was polished, orderly, efficient, dead, but somewhere out in the emptiness, there was a chance. A whisper of the past still buried beneath frozen ground. Approaching Epsilon Trias system. CR7 announced from the console beside him. Elias glanced at the display. The moon loomed ahead, drifting in orbit around a lifeless gas giant. Covered in ice and barely larger than a city, it had no atmosphere, no settlements, and no Dominion activity. On paper, it was worthless, which made it the perfect place, too. Hide something powerful. Any signs of a signal? Elias asked. Negative. The Bastion Red facility is operating in stealth mode or has fully shut down. I recommend caution. He tightened his harness. We're not here to be careful. We're here to wake something up. The shuttle descended onto the ice, landing with a soft thump. Snow drifted across the hull. Outside, there was only silence, just wind and old ghosts. Elias stepped out into the cold, helmet sealed tight. The surface was endless white, interrupted only by jagged ridges and frozen craters. He moved carefully, guided by CR7's scanner. After a few hundred meters, a sharp ping echoed through his headset. Metal detected. Buried 22 meters. Below, CR7 confirmed. Elias set down his pack and pulled out a thermal drill. It took nearly 2 hours to break through. He hit steel with a jarring clang, then cleared the rest by hand. An ancient access hatch emerged, frost clinging to its seams. The words Bastion Red Earth Strategic Command were still visible beneath the ice. Elias stared at it for a long moment. Then he opened it. The interior was dark, stale, and covered in frost. Emergency lights flickered on as he moved deeper. The facility sensing motion for the first time in centuries. The air was thin but breathable. CR27 linked to the internal systems and slowly began rebooting the station. Core power cells are degraded, the AI reported. But backup fusion is holding. Environmental systems stabilizing. Elias stepped into the main control room. It was like stepping into the past. Earth banners still hung on the walls. Tactical maps covered in dust were frozen mid-update. Shelves filled with historical records, weapon blueprints, and unread messages lined the room. Here, humanity hadn't lost yet. It had simply run out of time. He wiped off a console and began searching. Bastion Red wasn't just a military outpost. It was a fallback repositorial library of everything Earth wanted to preserve if defeat was inevitable. It held not just weapons, but ideas, strategies, lessons from wars long gone, archives from the age of exploration, revolution, and rebellion. And deep in the vault, CR-7 located something even more valuable. Genetic archive intact, the AI said. Stored personnel profiles include tacticians, engineers, and field operatives. Most samples degraded, but some viable. Elias blinked. You're telling me we can bring people back? Cloning technology is operational, though limited. Memory integration is partial. These would not be perfect recreations, but the instincts, the drive, they would remain. Elias looked around at the sleeping fortress. He had come here hoping to find weapons. What he had found was a spark. A way to reignite what the galaxy had forgotten. Free will, determination, and the unshakable will to push back against the impossible. We rebuild here, he said. For what purpose? CR-27 asked. Elias didn't hesitate. To remind the galaxy that peace without freedom is just another kind of prison. He stood tall in the dim light, surrounded by the last flickers of a forgotten resistance, and slowly, the dark began to feel a little less empty. Bastion Red breathed again. The ancient base had begun to shake off its long sleep. Power flowed through frozen circuits. Long dormant consoles flickered to life. The air grew warmer. Lights hummed softly in the corridors. For the first time in centuries, human hands were moving across its control panels. Commander Elias Rourke stood in the heart of it all, watching the station come online one piece at a time. He had spent the last several days restoring life support, fuel cells, and defensive systems with the help of CR7, who managed to coax the rusted tech into cooperation. This place was built to outlast a war, Elias muttered, tightening a bolt on a power relay. Good thing. Looks like it still might have one left to fight. Scanners confirm zero Dominion activity in system. CR7 replied. We remain undetected. For now, Elias nodded. Then it's time to stop hiding. He walked into the old communications room, where a long-range signal array sat under a tarp of ice and dust. With effort, he pulled it free, rerouted power, and watched the systems flicker back to life. What's our range? Approximately 4 sectors limited. Due to damage in the upper relay. But we can broadcast wideband on outdated frequencies. They may still be monitored by those outside Dominion jurisdiction. Elias stared at the blinking cursor on the message screen. He dreamed of this moment in Stacism Small Hope, buried deep in the corners of his frozen mind, that if he ever awoke, someone else would be out there waiting. Not armies, not heroes, just someone. He typed slowly, carefully, knowing that every word mattered. To anyone listening, my name is Commander Elias Rourke, former Earth Resistance. I don't know how many of us are left, but if you're out there, remember what it means to choose your own path. Spawned, you are not alone. He hit transmit. The message disappeared into the stars. For 2 days, nothing came back. Elias kept working, repairing weapon systems, calibrating old drones, and reviewing the archive strategies of Earth's greatest tacticians. The base had hundreds of recorded war games, simulated rebellions, and defense protocols stored in encrypted cores. He began training again, running drills through the halls like a ghost chasing his younger self. Then, just as he was beginning to believe the signal had faded into empty space, the console beeped .cr-7 single quotes as voice crackled with faint urgency. Incoming transmission. Elias spun toward the comms console. The signal was weak, distorted but undeniably real. A woman's voice, heavy with static. This is Nara Ven, independent trader. ... Sector 12. I heard your signal. You're really human. Real human. Thought we were all the transmission. Cut out. Then another. Commander Rourke. This is Captain Solon Drax of the Grelith Freeborn. You're not the only one who remembers. More followed short, scattered, broken but real. Elias leaned back in the chair, staring at the console as if it were glowing. The galaxy wasn't as asleep as it seemed. By the end of the week, 10 signals had come through. One was from a half-buried listening post on an asteroid colony. Another from a forgotten Earth transport that had drifted off course before surrender. A few were from Alien Voices quiet sympathizers who remembered life before Dominion order. Each one came with the same question, though spoken differently. Is it really possible? Could we take it back? Elias didn't offer promises. He didn't claim victory. He just told them the truth. Bastion Red was alive. A place of free minds still existed. And it was just the beginning. But to do more, they needed to move. To act. To show the galaxy that resistance wasn't extinct. CR-7 approached with a suggestion. A former Dominion control node on Orphean Prime, once used to distribute law-level psychic dampening across 3 sectors. If they could disable it, thousands would be freed from the mental haze. It was a bold move and dangerous. Elias looked out into the dark once more. Then we make them see it. We remind them what it means to feel. The first mission of the new resistance had begun. The shuttle dropped through the clouds of Orpheon Prime like a shadow. Elias sat in the pilot's seat. His eyes locked on the Dominion structure rising from the center of a mist-covered plateau below. It was called a quiet Koran enormous. Spire of black alloy that pulsed with subtle energy. Its purpose was simple: suppress strong emotions across entire populations. Not control minds outright, but dim the flame of defiance. So subtle, most never noticed. But Elias had noticed. And now he was going to shut it down. Approaching target perimeter, CR7 announced calmly. There are no patrols. Dominion confidence remains high. Let's change that, Elias replied. Guiding the shuttle toward a narrow cliff ledge, inside the cargo hold, 2 others waited. Nara Ven, the independent trader who had answered his signal first, was strapping on salvaged armor. She'd lost. A brother to the Dominion's psychic, Hayes watched him fade into obedience without a single argument. Since then, she'd been waiting for something or someone to strike back. Next to her stood Solon Drax, former officer of the Grelith Freeborn. He wasn't human tall, silver-eyed, and once part of a proud warrior culture that had folded under Dominion influence. Now, his people chanted empty mantras and served as peacekeepers. He had defected quietly, disgusted by what they had become. They were small, unproven, but Elias had seen something in both of them. A spark. You know the plan, Elias said, locking his rifle into place. We'll get in, disable the core, and broadcast it shut down. The goal isn't destruction, it's disruption. We make people ask questions. Questions are dangerous, Nara muttered, checking her charge pack. They're supposed to be, Elias said, with a faint smile. The trio infiltrated the tower from a maintenance shaft. CR7 guided them through a blind spot in the tower's scanning fields. The corridors inside were cold and silent. Machines hummed softly, no guards, no visible weapons. It didn't need them. The tower was built to fight minds, not bodies. As they moved deeper, Elias could feel the pressure building. Not physical, but emotional. His thoughts slowed. His heartbeat dulled. Doubt crept in. Why am I here? What's the point? This won't matter. No, he muttered, shaking his head. Keep moving, Drax said quietly, as if reading the same. Storm. They reached the core chamber, an open dome of swirling light and crystalline structures. Suspended in the center was the quiet core itself, a floating matrix of energy pulsing like a heartbeat. CR27 patched in through a portable relay. Working fast. Core override in progress. Estimated time, 92 seconds. That's when the lights changed. A deep, resonating hum filled the air. Someone's here, Nara warned. A figure stepped from the far end of the chamber. Humanoid, tall, and wearing a sleek robe woven with violet threads. Eyes glowing softly. With psychic fire, High Warden Thiessen. Curious, the warden said calmly, tilting his head at Elias. You should not exist. And yet, here you are. Yeah, Elias said, raising his weapon. And I'm not alone. Thiessen didn't flinch. You bring fire to a world of still water. You will be drowned. The moment he raised his hand, the pressure in the room spiked. Nara staggered back. Drax fell to one knee, groaning. Their thoughts turned foggy, directionless. Elias clenched his jaw. The warden's power washed over him, but it didn't take. Instead of dulling, his mind pushed back. Chaotic, sharp, and unreadable. Thiessen's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Elias stepped forward. Your peace is built on fear. But you forgot something important, he said, voice steady. You can't control what you don't understand. And Then he fired the core shattered moments later. CR-27 completed the override and the tower's pulse ceased. Across 3 sectors, people lifted their heads, blinking, uncertain. For the first time in generations, emotion returned to their thoughts like color bleeding into grayscale. The quiet core was offline, and the Dominion was listening now. The core was gone and the galaxy. Notice 3 sectors once lulled into quiet. Obedience now buzzed with confusion. Markets slowed. Broadcasts faltered. Across cities, stations, and colony hubs, people paused mid-sentence, unsure why tears rose or laughter returned. Some collapsed in the streets, overwhelmed by emotion they hadn't felt in decades. The Dominion called it a systems anomaly, a temporary lapse in neural resonance. No cause for alarm, they said in calm, rehearsed tones. But something had shifted, and not even they could unshift it. At Bastion Red, Elias watched reports stream across dozens of intercepted networks. News anchors spoke a little faster, no longer perfectly measured. A student riot broke out on Verena Thretha, first in 200 years. In another sector, a worker strike spread in under an hour. "I think they're waking up," Nara said, standing behind him. Elias didn't respond immediately. He was watching a short clip of a child on Orpheon Prime, holding up a handwritten sign. "I feel things. Thank you." It was enough. This was just one node, Elias said, voice low. One tower. CR-27 chimed in. There are at least 72 confirmed nodes across Dominion space. Disabling even 10% could destabilize their control net. But now they know we're coming, Drax added, arms crossed. They won't make it easy again. Elias nodded. They'll send more than a psychic next time. He turned from the screens. Bastion Red had once been a cold tomb, buzzed with life. Refugees, defectors, and hidden allies had started arriving. Engineers, medics, even artists, people from across the stars, who remembered what it meant to be themselves. They called it the Coalition of Free Worlds. It was barely an organization, no flags, no borders. Just a message passed from system to system. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were silenced. Now speak. On a quiet moon near the Dominion's edge, in a chamber surrounded by flowing light and ancient symbols, the high circle of the Veltrax convened, for the first time in over 1,000 years. They argued, "This Rorc is a relic," said one, cloaked in gold. "A mistake left unchecked." "He is a signal," said another. And signals spread. The image of Elias flickered before them, grainy footage from Orpheon Prime showing him standing before the shattered core. His presence had a gravity they hadn't anticipated. His unpredictability made their influence falter. The Veltrax did not fear ships or weapons, but they feared ideas, and Elias Rorc had become one. "We should destroy him," said Thiessen. His voice low. "This human cannot be controlled. His mind is loud, untamed." Another warden leaned forward. "Loud minds are dangerous, but they are also contagious." The chamber fell silent. Then the decision was made. Send the collectors. Back at Bastion Red, preparations began. The message had reached more than just hopeful outliers. Other former military bunkers, hidden labs, and data cores across the galaxy lit up for the first time in centuries. Each had something to offer: fragments of the old world, shards of forgotten defiance. A transmission from the distant Tyran belt revealed something shocking: a hidden Terran cruiser, buried inside a mining asteroid and kept alive by an outlawed AI. The ship, called the Vigilant Resolve, was capable of long-range strikes and could cloak for days. Elias smiled when he saw it. "Looks like we just got ourselves a fleet." But before they could celebrate, a strange energy pulse rippled across the system. CR7's tone shifted instantly. Unknown vessel entering orbit. It's not Dominion standard. Registering anomalous psychic signatures. Elias rose from his seat. Thiessen didn't come alone this time. Outside, the stars twisted as a ship shaped like a black prism emerged. No windows, no engines. Just silence and pressure. Elias felt it in his bones. They weren't just coming for him now. They were coming for the idea of him, and that meant they were afraid. The sky above Bastion Red cracked with unnatural light. Elias stood on the hangar platform, staring at the silent prism-shaped vessel hovering above the icy moon. The collectors had arrived. They didn't need weapons or announcements. Their presence. Was the weapon broadcasting pure suppression like a second gravity pressing against the soul? All across the base, people stumbled. Voices fell quiet. Even the air seemed to still. They're suppressing thought across the base perimeter, CR7 warned. Localized dampening field. If it expands, our systems will collapse. They're not just here to stop us, Nara said, gripping a handheld jammer. They're here to erase us. Elias clenched his fists. Then let's give them something they can't erase. He turned to the group gathered behind him, fighters, engineers, former diplomats, and a few who still didn't know what they were yet. People from half a dozen species, all with one thing in common. They remembered. Listen to me, Elias called out, loud and clear. What you're feeling? That pressure? That weight? It's fear. Theirs, not ours. They're afraid of what we represent. They want silence again. But if you're still thinking, still choosing, then they haven't won. He looked toward the collector ship above. We've come too far to stop here. So we fight not just with weapons, but with will. We remind them that we are not machines. Silence hung for a breath, then movement. People scattered to their stations. Weapons were primed. Jammers were deployed. And Bastion Red, long hidden beneath ice, began to rise. The base itself had once been designed for planetary defense. It came alive with renewed purpose. Anti-orbital cannons emerged from the ridgelines, tracking the collector ship. Data beacons spread from the ground like roots, scrambling the Dominion's psychic net. Drax led a small squad of strike ships into low orbit, drawing fire and testing the collector's defenses. It didn't fire back. Instead, it sent tendrils of thought powerful, pressing nearly invisible waves of suggestion. One pilot lost control and drifted away, eyes glassy. Another froze mid-maneuver, until her co-pilot shook her awake. Elias launched last. Flying the Stormrunner, a hybrid strike craft rebuilt from Bastion Red's hangars. CR-27 sat in the co-pilot socket, interfacing directly with the ship's systems. The collector is targeting mines directly, CR-7 reported. But you are still unreadable. Elias narrowed his eyes. Then let's keep it that way. He accelerated straight toward the prism vessel inside the collector. The Veltrax mines swirled in confusion. They had dealt with insurrections before. They had seen violent uprisings, desperate acts, rebellions that roared and burned out. But this was different. This wasn't rage or chaos. This was clarity. They couldn't break it, and that terrified them. The Stormrunner pierced the ships. Outer shell using a resonance weapon built from ancient human blueprints and alien tech. The impact caused the vessel to shudder. Its calm shimmer fractured into static. From within, energy spilled like ink across the sky as the collector buckled. The pressure lifted back at Bastion Red. The people felt it instantly. The weight was gone. Laughter echoed through the halls. Cheers erupted in the control room. For the first time since the Dominion took hold, a collector had failed. Elias returned to the surface hours later. Scarred and exhausted, but standing. We didn't just win a fight, he told the coalition. We won a message. And that message traveled fast. Within days, 12 more worlds declared open defiance. Dominion agents were forced to retreat from city hubs. Independent media networks lit up. Artists painted the words we remember across walls and starports. In hidden chambers, the Veltrax watched the change unfold. Their perfect peace was cracking not from war, but from thought. And thought, once ignited, spread faster than anything they had prepared for. A voice played through their quiet chambers, Ilias's voice. Peace without freedom is silence, not harmony. You can't hold the galaxy still forever. Sooner or later, someone stands up. Just happened to be the first. They had ruled with control for centuries. But control only lasts until someone remembers how to choose. The stars stretched wide before Elias as he stood on the observation deck of Bastion Red. Outside, the galaxy was stirring. He had never imagined the rebellion would spread so quickly. What began as a flicker beneath the ice had become a blaze that no shadow could smother. Worlds that had bowed for centuries were standing tall, again uncertain, messy, but free. Behind him, Nara and Drax joined silently, watching the rising light of distant suns. We're outgunned, Nara said softly. More Dominion fleets are gathering every day. Elias nodded, but out of fear, not confidence. Drax frowned. They won't just watch us win. They'll try to crush everything we built. Elias smiled, tired but steady. They'll try, and we'll be ready. The Dominion's last great weapon had always been control, not just of armies, but of minds. Their power was a cage, and for generations, no one had dared to break free. Now, the cage was cracking. The coalition had grown from a handful of survivors to a galaxy-wide network. Hidden bases, secret supply lines, and bursts of open revolt challenged the Dominion at every turn. Each victory inspired more. Each act of defiance spread like wildfire. Elias thought back to the first moments in Bastion, read the cold silence. The buried truths, the slow awakening. He'd been told humans were unpredictable, dangerous, unworthy of peace. He knew now that unpredictability was a gift. A message came through the comm system. CR-27's voice held a rare note of urgency. Incoming Dominion fleet. Estimated 60 vessels. Command ship flagged as the Eclipse flagship of High Warden Thiessen. Elias's heart tightened. The war was coming home. But he did not flinch. He activated the coalition network. Everyone, listen up, he said, voice steady and clear. This is the moment we fight not just for ourselves, but for every soul they try to silence. We fight so no one will ever be controlled again. The response was immediate, echoing across the stars. Ships aligned, weapons primed, minds sharpened. The battle above Orphean Prime was brutal. The Dominion unleashed everything: psychic waves, warships, even their elite, mind-controlled soldiers. But the coalition fought with something new. Freedom, where the Dominion sought to suppress. The coalition embraced unpredictability. Fighters dodged in chaotic patterns. Minds linked freely, sharing strategies and hope. The vigilant resolve led daring strikes, breaking through enemy lines with precision. Thiessen, aboard the Eclipse, confronted Elias in a final psychic duel. You are nothing but chaos, Thiessen hissed. I am order. Elias's mind pushed back with memories of Earth's rebellion, of resistance, of hope. No, Elias said quietly. I am choice. With that, the mental grip the Warden held over the galaxy shattered. The Eclipse faltered and drifted, its control broken. Dominion fleets began to retreat. On the ground, the galaxy erupted in celebration. But Elias knew this was not the end. It was a beginning. Days later, The coalition gathered at Bastion Red. Leaders from dozens of worlds stood shoulder to shoulder. There were no crowns or titles, only voices raised in determination. Elias addressed them. Peace enforced by fear is no peace at all. The galaxy deserves better. We will build a future where every world, every people can choose their own path. He looked to Nara and Drax, who stood with him through every step. Fear is easy to spread. Courage, unity, and freedom, those are harder. But they are worth fighting for. The crowd erupted in cheers. Outside. The stars shone a little brighter. The galaxy was no longer quiet. It was alive. The end.